Today, we're cracking open a source that really gets to the core of what might be holding us back, often without us even seeing it. We're diving into Ryan Holiday's book, Ego is the Enemy.
Yeah, it's a powerful one. And our mission today is basically to pull out the key stuff from this. We want to explore how this thing, ego, affects us at, well, 3 really critical points in life or work.
Right.
When you're aspiring to something, when you actually achieve some success, and then maybe the hardest part, when you face failure.
Exactly. And it's not just theory, is it? Holiday fills the book with these really surprising stories from history, ideas that kind of make you stop and think, maybe challenge what you assume about success or confidence.
Totally. He frames ego not as, healthy confidence, but more like this enemy within, something that can sabotage your potential, hollow out success, or make failure just crushing.
Yeah, that voice inside that's always saying, look at me, or I know this already, or maybe that's not fair.
Right. And understanding how that voice, that impulse, actually works against what you really want long term.
So let's jump into that first stage then. Aspiration. This is the start, right? You've got a goal, a new venture, maybe changing careers.
Yeah, you're setting out, got the energy, maybe a bit nervous. But like the book points out, so many people just don't get where they intended. And ego in this early phase is a huge reason why.
And one of the first traps he talks about is this whole talk versus actually doing the work, to be or to do.
Oh yeah, this one hits home. It's so easy to get caught up just talking about what you're going to do,
instead of the actual, often kind of boring work involved.
Right. The example he uses is wild. Upton Sinclair, the author, he ran for governor of California.
Okay.
And before the election, he publishes a book called, wait for it, I, Governor of California, and How I Ended Poverty.
No. Seriously?
Yep. Like past tense, as if it already happened.
Wow. So he lived it all out in his head first.
Pretty much. And people noticed after the book came out, he seemed less interested in the actual campaign. It's like his ego got the win without the work.
You see that everywhere now, right?
Yeah.
Especially online. Spending hours tweeting about your future empire, or just scrolling.
Or curating that perfect image. It feels like work, like building your brand.
But it stalls the real thing. He mentions a writer who spent a year basically doing everything except writing the novel.
Yeah, trapped in that loop. Ego wants the reward up front.
It tricks you. Projection feels like reality. Big roadblock.
Huge. And the counter to that, especially early on, is the next idea, become a student.
This feels fundamental. If you're aspiring, you're by definition not the expert yet.
But ego hates admitting it doesn't know.
Yeah.
The example of Kirk Hammett from Metallica is just brilliant.
Right. Already in this massive band, successful by any measure.
And then he goes and takes lessons from Joe Satriani, the guitar god himself.
That's the amazing part. He could have just coasted, thought I made it, but no.
He knew he could be better, and he was willing to put his ego aside, go back to basics, face critique from someone like Satriani, who was known for being tough.
Stuff other pros might not handle.
Exactly. It wasn't just talent. It was that humility, that willingness to learn. And that applies everywhere: science, philosophy, sports, politics. You need mentors, coaches, feedback.
But ego shouts, you know enough, you're already there. And that just shuts down growth, makes you resist the very help you need.
Yeah, your teacher could be anyone, a mentor, a book, even just a tough experience. Ego makes you stubborn.
So you got to cultivate that beginner's mind, always.
Always. Which leads to another really interesting kind of counterintuitive idea for this stage, the canvas strategy.
Okay, explain this one. It sounds different.
It totally flips the script on climbing the ladder. Instead of just focusing on yourself, how you can get ahead.
You focus on making other people look good.
Pretty much. You find someone else's canvas and help them paint their masterpiece. Holiday contrasts this bitter poet, Marshall, who hated serving patrons, with people like Ben Franklin or Bill Belichick early on. They focused on contributing, making their superiors successful, often behind the scenes, not grabbing credit.
So it reframes serving, not as being subservient, but as providing essential support.
Exactly. You become the person who makes things happen for others. Indispensable.
And the advice is kind of jarring. Be lesser. Do more.
Yeah. It means actively looking for ways to help your boss or your team, giving away ideas, doing the grunt work nobody wants, fixing problems quietly, producing more than asked.
That's smart. It starves the ego because you're not chasing the spotlight.
Right.
But you're building skills, relationships, learning the ropes, all under the radar. It's like compound interest for your career built on substance.
Substance over flash, exactly.
Okay, but let's be real. Starting out, you're going to get knocked down. People dismiss you, maybe treat you unfairly. That's where restrain yourself comes in.
Oh, yeah. Ego absolutely detests this. It wants to lash out, fight back, correct everyone. Don't you know who I am? That kind of thing.
Yeah, that impulse is strong.
But the story about Branch Rickey and Jackie Robinson is just, wow. Rickey didn't ask if Robinson could fight. He asked if he had the guts not to fight back.
He knew the abuse Robinson would face breaking the color barrier.
He literally acted it out for him, the slurs, the pitches aimed at his head. And Robinson agreed to endure it. Not passively, but strategically.
Because reacting would give them exactly what they wanted, an excuse to kick him out.
Exactly. His restraint was immense strength, part of a larger plan. Now, our struggles might not be that monumental, but the principle holds. Ego screams for immediate justice.
But sometimes you have to just take it, endure it.
Take it, eat it, brush it off, work harder, play the long game, ignore the noise. Because, and this is key, it doesn't actually diminish you when someone treats you badly. Okay. It diminishes them. It's brutally hard advice, but often necessary when you're the newcomer.
Use the resistance, the lack of appreciation, as fuel or cover to get better.
Right. Restraint buys you the future ego demands now.
Okay, last one for aspiration. Get out of your own head. This sounds familiar.
It's that trap Alan Watts talked about. Thinking so much you lose touch with reality, living in illusions. You see it in fictional characters lost in their own heads.
Holden Caulfield, maybe.
Yeah, or real people paralyzed by self-obsession. Plato's idea of people feasting on their own thoughts, arranging things perfectly internally instead of dealing with the messy outside world.
The military example was General McClellan, right, in the Civil War.
Devastating. He had advantages, but was crippled by his own fantasies, his paranoia. Convinced the enemy was stronger, allies were traitors.
His colossal egotism, the book says, stopped him from leading effectively, trapped in his own story.
Right. And Anne Lamott's station KFKD analogy, that internal radio playing nonstop self-praise or self-attack.
That imaginary audience feeling.
Totally. Constantly performing or judging yourself in your head. Contrast that with General Marshall,
Who refused to keep a diary during WWII.
yeah, worried it would make him self-conscious, performative, instead of just dealing with reality.
So the core message is, just don't boast. Get out of your head and do the work.
Pretty much. Dwelling on your own greatness or victimhood is ego stopping you from engaging with the real world, taking the actual steps. Easy trap to fall into.
Okay, so that's aspiration ego trying to stop you before you start. But what about when you do succeed?
Success. This is fertile ground for ego. It doesn't just stick around, it gets louder, more dangerous. The traits that maybe helped you push through initially can become huge problems.
And the first point is one we just covered, but maybe even more important now. Always stay a student.
Crucial, because success whispers, you figured it out, you're the expert now. But look at Genghis Khan.
We think conquerors, right? Brutal dude.
Yes, but the book emphasizes he was also a perpetual student. His crazy success wasn't just raw talent. It was constant, pragmatic learning. He absorbed the best tech, tactics, admin skills from everyone he encountered.
So his empire wasn't just force, it was learning.
A persistent cycle of pragmatic learning, yeah. Ego would say, I'm the Khan, I know best. But his openness to learn kept him ahead. Like Wynton Marsalis said, humility beats back the arrogance that puts blinders on.
Keeps you seeing reality. Peter Drucker's point too, know how you learn, keep learning, otherwise success makes you stagnant.
Definitely. And another echo from earlier, but super dangerous in success. Don't tell yourself a story.
Meaning, don't buy into your own hype after you've made it.
Exactly. The temptation to create this heroic myth about how it all unfolded according to your brilliant master plan. Look at Bill Walsh and the 49ers.
Took them from worth to Super Bowl champs, like incredibly fast.
Yeah, and it would have been so easy for him to say, see, I had it mapped out. But he refused. He said thinking he had a grand timetable for that terrible team was utterly delusional.
So what did he focus on?
The standard of performance. Tiny, exacting details for everything. Drills, practice, how the office was run. His philosophy was focus on the process. The score takes care of itself.
Even fired a coach for complaining about the details?
Yep. Because crafting those heroic stories feels good to the ego, but it's false. It simplifies reality, makes you believe your own myth, and stops you doing the hard, detailed work needed to stay successful.
Success also brings new challenges, distractions, comparisons, which leads to what's important to you.
Right. Suddenly you have options, you see other successful people, and ego just loves to compare. That leads straight to envy, feeling inadequate no matter what you've achieved. You start looking sideways, lose your own path.
The book mentions that Greek word, euthymia.
Yeah, euthymia. That sense of inner peace, staying on your own track, not getting pulled off course by what others are doing or have.
So it's not about beating everyone, but being the best you can be at what you do.
Exactly. And that means defining what's truly important to you. Money, family, impact, craft. Because strategies often conflict. You can't have it all. Ego hates making those trade-offs. It wants everything.
Frederick Douglass. A man is worked upon by what he works on. What you chase shapes you. The Howard Hughes story is chill in there.
Yeah, all that success, but died miserable, isolated. Couldn't handle the good fortune. Couldn't define what mattered beyond ego.
Without that internal compass, you just end up chasing more for its own sake. Empty.
Very. And with success, some really toxic traits can bloom, fed by ego, entitlement, control, paranoia.
The Xerxes example is nuts. Whipping the sea, beheading engineers.
Pure entitlement and rage when reality didn't obey him. Or Ty Warner with Beanie Babies, thinking he could sell anything just by putting his name on it. Hubris.
So the drive that got you there turns sour.
It can. Ambition becomes entitlement. Leadership becomes addiction to control. Proving people wrong becomes paranoia, seeing enemies everywhere.
Nixon's tapes sound like that lost in a bubble, rejecting feedback, paranoid.
Completely. And General Scott calling Jefferson Davis an enraged imbecile, hitting only himself. That captures how self-destructive this ego-driven state is.
This disease of me, as the book calls it. It hurts you and everyone around you.
And often creates the backlash it fears because people react to the arrogance.
Success also demands a shift in skills, right? From doing to managing. That's the managing yourself point.
Yeah. When you start, you're often the craftsperson. When you succeed, especially as a leader, you have to manage yourself, your time, your team. Eisenhower organizing the White House with clear delegation.
Versus John DeLorean.
Right. DeLorean rejected GM structure, wanted pure freedom, but ended up with chaos. Talent guy, good ideas, but total dysfunction.
Chasing colored balloons, the book says. Impulsive, couldn't delegate, surrounded himself with yes men.
His ego needing to be the sole genius destroyed the execution. This shift requires humility, redefining your role, maybe admitting others are better at certain tasks now.
Micromanagers, visionaries who lose interest, yes men collectors, all ego problems in management.
It takes clarity and focus on results, not just your own ego needs.
And that disease of me idea comes back with George Marshall as the positive example.
He's the gold standard here. While other generals were fighting for glory in WWII, Marshall was incredibly selfless. Balanced about rank, respected the office, but didn't angle for promotions that would slight his mentor.
And that story about forgiving the general who treated him badly, just because the guy was useful to the war effort.
That's magnanimity. True greatness beyond personal ego. Truman said Marshall never thought about himself.
Refusing to even look at his own portrait. Seeing image stuff as a distraction from the real work.
The absolute opposite of the disease of me. Focus on the mission, always.
Okay, so ego messes you up in aspiration, corrupts you in success. What about when things inevitably go wrong? Failure.
Yeah, this is where ego arguably causes the most pain. It makes failure feel unbearable, personal, and blocks recovery.
The book starts this part with Holliday's own story, right? The painful prologue, early success, then mentors imploding, his own life hitting walls.
Workaholism, panic attacks, relationship stress. He talks about that temptation to just erase the failures from your success narrative.
Pretend they didn't happen.
Right. But facing it forced him to see reality, like how his own drive, partly ego, had a real cost.
Which connects to how failure messes with our stories. Don't tell yourself a story, but applied to failure.
Failure shatters the neat success story. Katharine Graham inheriting the Washington Post after her husband's suicide is such a stark example.
Thrown in the deep end, totally unprepared.
And facing immediate, massive challenges. Sexism from the board, the Pentagon Papers decision that everyone advised against, Nixon's threats during Watergate.
Tit in a big fat ringer.
Yeah. Investors dumping stock. Her life didn't follow any plan. It was crisis after crisis. But her response.
Developed her own compass, hired the right people, made incredibly brave calls like publishing the papers, stood up to the White House, bought back stock when everyone thought she was crazy.
Exactly. And the result. Pulitzer Prizes, huge success, Buffett as a mentor. It proves Bill Walsh's point. Your road to victory often goes through failure. You have to understand it, accept it, push through.
But ego makes failure personal, that narcissistic injury thing.
Yeah, it makes you feel targeted by the universe, stops you learning. What you need isn't swagger then, it's quiet strength, resilience, purpose.
The alive time or dead time idea seems really relevant here too.
Definitely. Failure often gives you unwelcome time. What do you do with it? Malcolm X used prison total failure, rock bottom, as alive time. Radical self-improvement.
Reading, studying.
Transformed himself. And Katharine Graham, facing tragedy and threats, used that intense pressure cooker time to forge her character and ultimately achieve amazing things. Turned potential dead time into growth.
The opposite of just wallowing or getting distracted, letting it be wasted dead time.
Yeah.
The effort is enough. Also takes on new meaning in failure.
Yeah, back to that Stoic idea. You can't always control the outcome, but you control your effort, your integrity. Belisarius, the Byzantine general.
Saved the empire multiple times, got treated terribly by the emperor.
Constantly. Suspicion, betrayal, no recognition. His reward wasn't external praise, it was knowing he did his duty exceptionally well, kept his standards.
So even if your work isn't appreciated or the market tanks or whatever, the effort itself has value.
You have to find value there, because hitting bottom, like Rowling, Charlie Parker, LBJ, can be that catabasis, that descent that leads to deeper understanding. Humiliation can be a harsh but necessary teacher.
But ego's reaction to being cornered in failure, that's dangerous. Lashing out, blaming, revenge.
Super dangerous. Lance Armstrong destroying lives to protect his lie. Dov Charney doubling down on toxic behavior at American Apparel.
That's ego in its purest and most toxic form, the book says. Fear of losing face.
Exactly. It's self-destructive. Sometimes the only payback is watching someone else's ego destroy them from within, like in Fight Club.
Failure also forces an honest look at yourself.
Right.
Measuring ourselves against the standard.
Perfect opportunity, yeah. Strips away the illusions, like the Patriots after drafting Tom Brady, huge win.
But they focused on the failure, how they almost missed him.
Yeah, I kept a photo of a failed pick on the desk as a reminder. Stay humble. Focus on improving the process, the standard, not just celebrating wins or comparing scores.
Ego hates that kind of objective look. Humility, often forced by failure, drives real improvement. Like Graham buying back stock based on the company's true worth, not the market's panic.
Right, trusting your standard over the noise. Goethe's quote. Don't overestimate yourself, but also don't undervalue your true worth. Ego pushes the first, failure forces you to assess the second.
So, pulling it all together, the book argues that managing ego is key to living with purpose and perspective.
A big part of that is letting go of negativity. Always love, or at least not hate.
Because hate and resentment just eat you up inside.
Totally. Hurts you way more than the target. Hearst versus Citizen Kane, Nixon's enemies list, Dave Mustaine's decades of anger at Metallica.
Compared to Douglas, King Barbara, choosing empathy, seeing hate as a disease, King saying love your enemies by looking at yourself first. Orson Welles just moving on from Hearst.
Hate is ego's defense and failure. Blame others, avoid the real work.
And finding perspective beyond yourself helps too. Living hidden cosmic sympathy.
Yeah, getting out of the me. John Muir feeling that connection to nature, the cosmos, realizing his small part in a huge system. Ego wants you to be the center. Success and busyness can block that feeling.
Visiting historical sites, battlefields, realizing how small we are in history, but also connected.
Exactly. Cleopatra closer to Pizza Hut than the pyramids. Malcolm X and Lincoln connected across time. Neil deGrasse Tyson's idea. We're tiny, but also connected to everything.
Go into the wilderness, literal or figurative, to silence the ego noise and get perspective. Creativity needs that openness.
We're part of something vast. That connection is empowering, not diminishing.
And finally, sobriety. Not literal sobriety only, but clear-headedness, realism.
Exactly. Self-command, staying grounded, especially crucial in success. Angela Merkel is a modern example.
Plain, modest, focused on analysis and results, not flash. Didn't flinch at Putin's dog intimidation. Compromise on anything but principle.
Right, because power, as Shelby Foote said, fragments close as options mesmerizes. Ego clouds the mind when clarity is most needed. Sobriety is the anchor.
Steak over sizzle, like Belichick. Substance over image. Avoiding the ego traps. Image obsession, contempt, demanding star treatment, rage.
James Basford. It requires a strong constitution to withstand repeated attacks of prosperity. Sobriety is that constitution. Howard Hughes again, success without that inner balance is empty misery.
So the big takeaway is pretty clear. Ego is the enemy. full stop, at every single stage.
Yeah, it twists your goals when you start, poisons your success, and makes failure feel like the end of the world. It's like a drug feels good initially, maybe, but isolates and destroys in the long run.
And it's not a one-time fight, it's constant.
Constant vigilance. But the tools are there. Humility, realism, hard work, discipline, restraint, perspective, purpose, self-command, learning, helping others, timeless stuff.
Recognizing it in yourself is the huge first step, though. Maybe the hardest.
Absolutely. That internal check-in you got to keep doing.
So for everyone listening, as you think about where you are aspiring, succeeding, maybe facing a setback, where's that ego voice whispering? What's it telling you?
And more importantly, how are you going to choose to respond? What's the counter move?
Something to really chew on. That's our deep dive for today into ego is the enemy. Hope it gave you some useful things to think about.
Yeah, definitely food for thought. Until next time.